Welcome or welcome back to the Light Renegades. My name is Star. This is video 2 of catch-up videos of channelings that I've been sat on since January, everyone. So I'm going to hop right into a message from the Galactic Alliance, which is our fraction of the Galactic Federation of Light that once was. And now I had a lot of questions towards the GA, towards the galactic expression of all of this, because I felt like my head was just being consistently turned to look at God again, to look at Christianity again, and I wish I'd looked it up before I started recording, but at a certain point I was in the absolute tatters of this expression, and I was going through a lot of grief at the time, and I was guided to go to the spiritualist church, and then I had an encounter with what I would consider to be the most powerful force that I have felt in my awakening to date. And this voice, this expression, it wasn't even a voice, it's like a presence. I don't know how to describe it because it's not an audible voice that I hear like different types of channeling. It was just an omnipresence of knowing so strong that felt masculine in its presence because it was so strong. And this omnipresence said to me that they were God. And I was floored, there was tears, there was everything. And I said, if this is true, I also need another sign. And that next morning, someone showed up at my front door with a crucifix. And they didn't know what I'd gone through that night before, but they just said to me, I was guided to come and give you this. And I was too in bits to even explain to them what it meant at the time. And I just hugged them and I said, you have no idea what you've just given me, but you've given me everything. And it was so much. And I wanted to say that I didn't really take much from that space because I was just dealing with so much at the time. But now looking back, I can completely see where this was always just a consistent strain throughout this whole expression of me grappling with my soul, what it meant for me to be here. I went through Catholic schooling, even though I'm not Catholic. Half my family is very heavily Christian, but you know, I've always felt the presence of something. I always called it light. I couldn't get down with God being a man. That is still something that I find difficult to understand or process, who I am here right now. So there has been this grappling with that essence, you know, and I was told at that time when God came to me was that, don't worry, you've always been consistently doing my work. And then from that point forward, I felt like I was seeing things so clearly. I felt like I could see exactly where I was placed and why, and what was happening and what I was supposed to be doing. At least to the point of me feeling like that is a positive space, that is a negative space, that is a positive space, that is a negative space. At least for me personally, and some souls around me and some souls that I was working with. So I knew that this armor and this banner of God was placed upon me at a certain point, even deeper than I could have anticipated. It was just around. I didn't know that it was there, and I was brought into a space of where the angelic kingdom opened up like never before. And this was something that was consistently coming through, and I think it was 2023, if not 2024, when I started to bring forward channelings from the angelic, I can't even remember what I called it, the angelic expression somewhere. And this was always preparing me for this present given time. And I have a lot of theories as I think to what has been going on, what we are dealing with right now, everyone, that is pretty complex. And I'm trying to work and ease us into that expression because I feel like this is the most clarity that I've been given to date on this path. And I now know why it didn't happen any sooner than now, because it is just so much to try and comprehend. And I don't believe that we are supposed to comprehend absolutely everything because it's just too much for us. But there is layers to all of this. There is layers, there are pockets where, you know, a set of rules has to be abided by in this way, and then you move somewhere else and the rules are different. The idea of light and shadow is the same, but the rules and regulations are different. And I realized that I couldn't hold on to any one specific expression because I was jumping between timelines that quickly. And now that I'm not doing that, I can see how much I was doing that. And there were still certain days where I wake up and I think, okay, everything is still different again. I'm not in the reality that I was yesterday. So that's an encouragement to those souls that might feel in that presence too, in the understanding that everything is always constantly shifting on a dime is what I want to share. And it's interesting because Shauna Earl Francis brought in a coin that I given to her when we were in Bath together, and this idea of everything flipping on a dime just keeps coming through for me over and over again, and I feel like this is a real deep expression for some, so I'm sharing that in case that means something to somebody out there. But I've got a channeling from the GA, which is from the 14th of January, and it was titled Feeling Whole in 2026. And please bear with me, everyone, because I'm having such a time trying to read again because I've just been used to straight channeling for a while. But they started with, the mere nothing that you are anything other than whole is an entrapment of the mind. Sensations of the body and limitations the distorted world has used to keep you feeling unworthy and unstable. There is so much of this world that many are yet to experience through the sheer lack of self-love. The idea, if you don't have heart, you don't have anything, is very real and true. So many here still existing in a space of, oh, if I could just heal this or that, everything would be better. We understand physical ailments are most definitely a constraint in terms of mobility. But this aside, the feeling of lack of wholeness comes from the emptiness that you are fed daily. The separation that you are fed daily, the mere notion that you are anything other than whole in your own right is a limiting expression or belief that needs addressing, and now. It is your state of mind and connection with your heart that shifts and shapes your reality. The minute you've had enough and your soul is in alignment and agreement, everything begins to shift. You start to feel different. What once seemed like a daunting task becomes easier. How you look at yourself on a daily basis becomes brighter, and you start to see the world through the lens of beauty and ease. You were not born to suffer. You were not born to live a life that didn't have any enjoyment in it. So seek the spaces that help you feel whole. This dear soul was at quite the time feeling into her newfound freedom and expression of joy. The fear that it may be taken away, I'm not allowed that creeps in often. This is true, and a thought that comes from you or somewhere else. And I share my thoughts on happiness and worthiness, and I feel like this could be a whole series in itself, and apologies everyone, I don't feel like I gave that justice. But basically what the GA was expressing is this idea of, the idea that we are anything other but whole in any given moment is an idea of lack that comes outside of self. This has been something that has been programmed to us, it's been passed down through our family lineages. You know, the times that came before us, the different generations that have lived, there was so much suppression, and I'm so grateful to be able to have a lot of souls in my life that are very, very close to me, that have lived a lot more life than I have, because their wisdom is invaluable. You know, the things that they have taught me, their expression and their understanding has given me so much on my life path. And I know, and I always said this, I would not be able to be here, we would not have been able to create the Light Renegade space if we haven't had those dear souls that have been fighting this battle for many, many years. I honestly do not know how you've done it. I've lasted 5 years, and I was ready to throw in the towel. So to be doing this for, centuries is just phenomenal. Those souls that came from times where there was just nothing and no freedom, especially the feminine energy, this idea and understanding that, the feminine voice hasn't been that loud, wasn't being able to be shown or given in the most recent years. And it's not that long ago. I've been in a lot of discussions and with other people's, even their families, and speaking to their lineage and understanding that this freedom is something that we have to give ourselves. And even when there was so much suppression around you, you have to just say, I'm whole and I'm healed. And this was something that I too was getting trapped in within myself, this idea of not being healed. And at some point between the beginning of 2026 and a few months ago, I want to say that I went through this expression of, that's it. I've done enough. I've done enough to be healed and be whole. And what I'm working with now is just an extension of how I want to be enjoying my life. And this was, it took me a long while to get here. I kept just picking at things and myself and feeling like I hadn't done enough. I haven't healed enough. Otherwise things wouldn't be like this. It wouldn't be perfect. And I realized that life was never going to be perfect. It was about the energy that I was giving to certain situations and overextending and giving out my energy to spaces that it just wasn't supposed to be in anymore. And this understanding of keeping your own vibration for yourself and giving your own cup of love to yourself before another is very real and true. And now this is different when you have family, when you are holding space for others. There was times in this pathway where everything for me was completely collapsing, but I knew I had to show up for someone else. But those expressions and those understandings come through for you, and you will feel it, and you'll be given extra energy and an extra boost to take you where you are. Because I don't believe that this energy comes from me, it comes from a higher source. Nothing is ever me. I'm merely the vehicle for all of this, and I've consistently said this on this pathway. But this idea of allowing for yourself to be free in this present given time and really enjoying your time, and it's very difficult, and I found it incredibly difficult to get into the seat of enjoyment. You know, for so much of this journey, I was having to fight tooth and nail for my expression, for what I was bringing forward, for my freedom. And at a certain point, I just collapsed. And this is why Teams of Light stopped me from being on here, because they knew that I needed to go through that shedding, that collapsing, to say, hang on a minute, like, look around, look how much you've grown for yourself, look how much you've changed from where you were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, even 2 years ago. I feel like I'm growing consistently daily. There is still a collapsing and a growth that happens on an hourly basis, especially now. And this week alone, through the supermoon, something else has very, very much shifted within me, which I'm eternally grateful for. But this idea of worthiness is this idea of understanding that happiness is your birthright and that you deserve to be here. And that's twice. A bird has flew really close to my window. So take this as truth. Hold this in your heart. You deserve a life of ease. You deserve to be happy. If you are not receiving that right now, there is something that needs to be addressed. And this might not necessarily be within self. This might be the outside circumstances, you know, how you relate to that might need to change. Might not be a you problem. And I feel like this is something that is very, very difficult when you take a path of light, when you take a path of being a light worker. I realized that I was being pushed into spaces, and it was like an obligation that was placed upon me to just take from people BS, because people knew that, you know, I had the higher awareness. And at a certain point I had to say, no, that is not happening anymore. You need to take responsibility for yourself and your actions. I can't carry the weight of this for you, nor am I just gonna just allow for you to slap me or give me BS, because it's not mine. And I think at a certain point you have to say this, even when it's the people that are closest to you. You have to say, no more, I can't carry this weight, because you are not supposed to. And specifically when you know that you are stepping forward, you have to come from that filled cup for self. So there is a lot of practices that I think are very beneficial. Popping yourself in a bubble of your energy, for one, filling your hands with vibration and energy that is of the highest vibration of love, and literally, you know, drinking it in, imagining yourself drinking this vibration. Being out in nature is a great way to come back to your state. And there was days where I just spent hours and hours and hours outside laying on the grass. That was my time to come back to self. Everything got very chaotic in these experiences. I'm going to share more about that in an updated message, but there was something that I just needed to come back to, and it's this home essence within self. And I think the minute that you stop picking at yourself, the minute that you stop taking on this expression of, I'm not right, there's something wrong with me, I need to heal more. And you know, sometimes this is a projection of others, and I realized I was just taking in all of these projections of others, and it wasn't mine. It wasn't mine to deal with. It was like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks about you. It's how you feel and think about yourself. And of course, you have to think about, you know, being kind and gracious to others, of course, good of all, harm to none, I like to say. But when you know that you're coming from that standpoint, anything else on top of that is just weight that is not yours to carry. So return to sender with love. That is a full and complete sentence. No is also a full and complete sentence, which I feel like I've only just started to learn the preciousness of. No, I'm not doing it. This is not mine. I'm sorry, no thank you. It's okay. You can keep that. This is now mine. Bye-bye. These are things that I've been having to learn. Boundaries, I've been having to learn. I didn't have any. I wasn't taught boundaries. And, you know, there's expressions of where I didn't have boundaries for others either. And, you know, that was not a healthy expression to come from. So I paid my dues where I can in certain spaces. And I've allowed for myself to learn these difficult truths. Okay, I need to create stronger boundaries for myself, but also for myself in my own personal journey, and say, I've healed enough, I'm whole enough, and I deserve to be happy, and I deserve to receive love now. And I feel like this is a massive, massive, massive thing that isn't spoken about enough, you know. This idea of that you have to be whole and complete before receiving love. Yes, it's true in a certain circumstance, but also this expression of that everyone is worthy of love in any given moment of their lifetime. And I feel like that just has to be the full truth. Unconditional love, you know, can be given from nature, and it is there for you. So go and seek that. And I feel like this is such a strong expression of the sheer lack of self-love. This can rule your life, and it was definitely ruling mine for a very, very, very long time. And it took me to some dark essences and expressions that I just didn't need to be in communication with, because there was just a lack of self-love there for self. And now that I'm on the other side of that and I can see it, I try and give anyone that I meet just this boost of, you know, to tell them that they are amazing, and that whatever they wish to do in their life, they are more than capable of doing, because that is That is the truth. And the minute that you start to believe that for self, that is when everything does shift. That is when you start to see yourself differently. That is when you start to view your life differently. And I feel like this is when a lot of clarity does become a banner over your life. So if you would like to delve into more of this expression with me personally, please do not hesitate to reach out, because I'd love to be working with more of this collective, because I feel like I've learned so much in the past 6 years. It is unbelievable. And this idea of understanding self-worth and self-love is very, very close to my heart. And I feel like this is something that has been my life's work, been my life's journey, and I'm very grateful to be in the spaces that I'm in now and receiving and loving myself as deeply as I do now. It's been a long time coming. So that's encouragement to anyone that needs to hear it. Please go back to your everyday practices. Meditation is essential. Spending time in nature is essential. Make sure that you are hydrating your body, looking after your mind, body, and spirit in unison. I will continue to say that because it is very important. But feeling whole in 2026 is manageable, everyone. It is here. It is ready for the taking. It is right for the taking. All you have to say is I'm ready to accept it. But I'm going to pause here. I'm going to go into another video, so please do follow on for part 3 of the update videos. But I'll be back real soon. Take care.